Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together.
Today, I'm chatting with Jennifer Lawrence from Card Factory, who's the Chief People and Transformation Officer. She's going to be sharing some nuggets about how TA and HR leaders can truly have a seat at the top table when it comes to strategy. She's also going to be sharing her thoughts on how putting purpose at the forefront can help build a transformational, award-winning culture. My name's Neil Armstrong from TribePad. Welcome to The View, where people, recruitment and purpose come together. So, how do you build an award-winning company culture, and how can you use that company culture to turbocharge, a fast-growing business? Well, to answer those questions, I am chatting today with Jennifer Lawrence, who's Chief People and Transformation Officer at Card Factory. Jen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So before we start chatting about Card Factory, let's find out a bit more about you. You've been with Card Factory for 4 years, but you've got a wealth of experience across all sorts of different industries before that. Can you tell us a bit about your career up to this point?
Sure. Yeah, I started life in HR right from the get-go. Really, at kind of 19, I think I was. I did a certificate in personnel and training practice, I think it was called back then, and that sort of entered me into my first role. So back then I was working for Hampshire County Council. Distinctly remember having a headset on, listening to people asking for applications and sharing their address details and writing that on envelopes.
Wow.
Putting sick notes in very large cabinets. So that's where it all started. And then relocated up to the north. I've worked for the NHS for a short period of time. I worked for a college, and then I think my career properly started, if you like, when I joined Experian, and I was Experian for about 7 years. And I started there in an in-house recruitment role, and then went on to lead the recruitment team, and then I went into talent management, and then into HR business partnering. Before I then left and joined Boots, where I worked for 4 years, I think it was, 2 years in the kind of core Boots business, and then 2 years essentially as head of HR for Boots Opticians, which ran somewhat independently. It was part owned by an Italian frame manufacturer and part owned by Boots, so we operated a little bit independently with our own operating committee. So I sat the managing director there. And then I kind of went and worked at Equifax, very similar business to Experian, but they kind of cover more of the US market. Mm-hmm. And then I joined Costcutter, where I was hired as HR director, and I was there for 4 years before joining Card Factory. So that's the career in probably less than a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so I mean, quite the tour of really well-known brands, and particularly everybody will know the Card Factory logo, and we see the stores on high streets and shopping centres. But I imagine there's a lot more to the business than just the shops that you see.
Oh, a huge amount. So we're a vertically integrated business, which is one of the things that really attracted me, having worked at kind of Costcutter for 4 years, which is somewhat squeezed in a value chain. So they don't make anything, and then they don't actually touch the end customer. Whereas at Card Factory, we manufacture. Well, in fact, we go back even beyond. Prior to that, we design. We have our own design studio, so we're designing, the cards and the sentiment that goes in the cards, through to then manufacturing them, distributed through a third party, and then clearly we have a huge store network. So having that whole integrated model is something that personally attracted me to the business.
Yeah, I can imagine that's, and is that quite sort of unusual, that vertical integration? It must give you a real competitive advantage, particularly on price.
Absolutely, I think it absolutely does. So I think I do think it is quite unique. I mean, we won't be the only, but certainly within our industry, I think it is very unique.
Yeah. And
then I think the other thing about Card Factory that's was very appealing is the sense of helping people to celebrate their life moments, and that's kind of at the core of our purpose. So if anybody goes into one of our stores, it's almost palpable, the kind of the level of energy and the smile on colleagues' faces, and it's because generally the interaction they're having with customers is really, really positive. It's a moment that they want to celebrate, whether that's a wedding, or a milestone birthday, or whatever, whatever that might be.
So, I mean, people clearly absolutely fundamental to the customer experience and therefore the strategy of the business. And in terms of that strategy, Card Factory's been really bucking the trends on the high street, and your growth is pretty spectacular at the moment. What's sort of your role in that, and to talk about the sort of the excitement, I guess, that's going on in the business right now?
Yeah, so our CEO and CFO are kind of down in London this week, sharing our results and meeting with lots of analysts and investors. So there is a real buzz about the business, because we do have momentum and we are achieving good things. And I think that I don't think it's as a result of a lot of foundations being laid over the years. It's as a result of the really hard work to kind of build our brand, to get really clear about who we are, what we do, why we do what we do, and create that kind of framework that now acts as our North Star through everything, everything that we do, and get really clear about our strategy and our pillars and sources of growth. And they've remained unchanged for a number of years, and we continue to talk to the market about those strategic choices, whether that's building our core, continue to build our core business. And there's a huge celebration market that's largely untapped for us that we've got a real opportunity to expand into.
Yeah.
We then have a huge online and omni-channel opportunity. So how do we really create a seamless customer experience with our online offering? It's almost the best kept secret as well, we think, at the moment, that you can come to Card Factory and do what you can do on Moonpig or Thoughtful or Funky Pigeon.
Yeah.
A lot cheaper, and actually the quality's brilliant. And then thirdly, international partnerships. So growing our partnerships both in the UK and internationally. And we've created partnerships in the United Arab Emirates. We've acquired a business in South Africa, continue to do business in Australia, and we've got a number of markets of interest that we're exploring. Yeah. So I think, to answer the question, we've got really super clear about who we are, what we do, and where our growth is coming from, and we've galvanized the business behind doing that. So to answer your question about my role within that, so people and transformation, clearly that requires clarity, communication, engagement, equipping people to transition from a business that was hugely successful through opening new stores year on year to a business now that has different sources of growth. There's only so many Card Factories we can get in, on the high street before you start kind of saturating and cannibalizing. So actually, we've had to, I wouldn't say it's a pivot, but we've had to look at where the evolution of Card Factory is coming from, and that requires effort and development and training. And then there's the other part of my business, which is transformation. So essentially, I run two teams. So I run the people team and I run a transformation team. And the transformation team is that the purpose is to help the business deliver its strategy. So helping shape the strategy and translate that into our annual operating plan. Make sure that we've got the resources, the capital expenditure, track that, kind of support the business then with collecting requirements and ensuring delivery, and then presenting that back on an ongoing basis. So kind of feet to the fire sort of role within transformation.
That sounds really interesting and quite unusual in some respects. In some organization, HR and particularly recruitment, I guess, can sometimes be seen as sort of tactical support functions, but it sounds like you're right there at the top table driving strategy and change, which I think hopefully lots of people can learn from how you've got into that position and what you're doing there.
I think it's an interesting one. I was reflecting on this recently. I think I definitely think the pandemic's massively shifted the landscape on that perception around strategic value that kind of HR and talent acquisition play for a business. Nobody could do without their HR team through the pandemic, and if it wasn't for that team doing what they did, I think there are a lot of businesses that would be in a less fortunate place right now. So I think that changed the game actually, for a lot of organizations and for a lot of people functions. I think, for me, I've been fortunate enough to work with brilliant CEOs that absolutely understand the value of building brilliant cultures within an organization. And I think the people function are at the core of helping to shape, culture.
Yeah.
Through the, if we take it to talent acquisition, through the types of people we're bringing in that are aligned with culture and values, through to, development, creating a culture through narrative and communication and tone, and making sure that there's that leadership capability that runs right the way through the organization. So I've worked with what I would call enlightened CEOs that kind of absolutely believe in the core of that, which makes my life a lot easier. I don't need to convince them of the value that the people function brings. I just then need to bring the value.
And it's, I mean, what's interesting about that is I'm sure that it's not a coincidence that you've got CEOs with those views and the organization is thriving and expanding internationally when other retail organizations are struggling. Perhaps they haven't got that strength of culture, and hard to measure culture, but you're winning awards left, right, and center at the moment. It seems I see something on LinkedIn every week with another sort of best companies and company culture award. How have you has that been something you've actively pursued, and how much sort of effort has that been, and do you think it's worth it?
Yeah, I do think it's worth it. So the short answer is I do, because I think it builds momentum and it builds confidence and it builds trust. So I absolutely do. But it's not easy. It's not, you can't chase the award or the number in the survey. You've got to really listen and understand, and it's it has to be relentless, and you have to demonstrate that through engagement surveys and through forums and through any listening mechanism that you have in the organization, you're going to listen and you're going to properly consider and then act off the back of that. And if you think about what we've done over the years, is we've done that. We've gone through that cycle over and over again, and that's built like a really strong foundation of confidence and trust that we are an organization that is passionate about its people and creating a strong culture. And as I say, when colleagues tell us they want more communication, or colleagues tell us that there's a benefit that's just not kind of quite right, we can't do everything. There's only a finite amount of money that any business has got to invest, but we'll listen and we'll use that insight then to inform the decision making. And if we make a different decision, or we go back and we say why. So it's that constant kind of engagement. And then the other key area is absolutely around leadership, building leadership capability in the organization. So I firmly believe that people function should be there to unlock, to inspire, to kind of engage. But it's the leader's responsibility to lead their people and have that that close one-to-one relationship with their people, and for that not to be passed over to a third party. Where the engagement comes, we kind of typically join a business because there's a connection with an individual. It's what keeps us there, but it's also the thing that can be the derailer if that relationship isn't strong and you don't have that connection and you're not inspired and engaged and the communication isn't flowing, you don't feel supported or developed, you're not going to hang around. So we've been on a mission to drive that leadership ethos and capability in the organization, which touches on a number of factors: well-being, coaching. We've invested a lot in coaching qualifications actually for our people leaders in the organization. So we want to create a coaching culture. It's something that we firmly believe in, and a number of other areas in kind of driving that agenda forward. So I think for all of those reasons, we're fortunate that the effort that we've put in is now coming through in the recognition that we're receiving, which is great.
And it sounds like there's authenticity there in terms of that purpose of why the organization exists, what the values are, and making sure employees are feel genuinely part of the team, and really, really interesting and inspiring. And I wonder if you see in other organizations outside of Card Factory, I hear that there are post-pandemic, it was a very candidate-driven market, a very employee-driven market, and employers are sort of bending over left, right, and centre to do all kinds of things. And then maybe things are sort of the pendulum swinging back the other way, and there's, you know, other organisations are perhaps going through redundancy rounds and hiring freezes and return to the office policies and all sorts of things. I wonder what your take is on what's sort of happening in the environment generally at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I do think it's tough. I don't think anybody, certainly nobody, you know, anybody that I was talking to was expecting the increases in national living wage that we were. So for some organisations, that's largely irrelevant. But in our organisation, you know, our retail part of the business, our hourly paid colleagues are national living wage earners, and there was a significant increase in annual rate, and that impacts right the way up the hierarchy, because you want to keep the differentials between the levels that you have within the organisation. So suddenly there's a huge amount of cost, and then, you know, costs of goods have gone up, you know, dramatically, and then you know, we couldn't get product across the sea because of everything that was happening in the Red Sea, and so before you know it, the organisation has some real tensions and pressure. The best companies, I think, hold true to what they believe in through those times. I don't mean, you know, making poor investment choices and hanging on to investments when, you know, actually they really need to be thinking about customers and shareholder requirements, but they hold true to what, you know, what they believe in. So we take return to office changes, which I've seen, you know, a couple of examples of. We hold true to the belief that we trust our people, and we're an output focused organisation. Outside of, you know, the kind of the store environment, I'm talking more in our support centre environment where that's applicable. But we trust and we focus on output, and so we haven't pulled back on the policy that we launched in COVID. Actually, we've made some iterations to it, but it's very much about that kind of win-win trust, and agreeing locally what works for, you know, for local teams, as opposed to having an organisational policy. We call it our smart working principles, and there's a set of principles which act as our guideline, and then it's about, you know, local teams agreeing between them what works for them.
Sounds like again, it makes sense with your values and the successes, isn't it, of having an adult relationship with the team rather than an adult-child relationship, and I'm sure that's linked to your success as well.
I mean, you know, and I can empathise with organisations that have invested millions of pounds into state-of-the-art, you know, office environments, and, you know, wanting to get people back in. I can also empathise with some of the challenges of people not coming together regularly, you know, to the office, around, you know, whether it's collaboration, creativity, you know, innovation. I do think it does have an impact. I've seen it firsthand, and I think for younger colleagues joining an organisation, either, you know, fresh out of education, for example, they need that mentoring and that support around them for them to be able to develop. So I think there's a happy place in this, which is, you know, actually, you know, we do have a requirement for people to spend regular time in the office. We don't say it needs to be these days or how many days, but the principal idea is regular time. You know, so that the individual doesn't miss out and the organisation doesn't miss out on all of the benefits that come from physical contact, which you just can't get.
So, I mean, you mentioned there some big challenges in terms of, you know, cost of goods and cost of living, and so how does that present as challenges to you and your role in people and transformation? What are the biggest sort of headaches you're tackling right now?
I think one of them would be our reward roadmap. So we have an ambition to be a market median organisation, whether that's on pay or on benefits. We want to kind of be sort of smack bang in the middle, and each year we gather data to be able to assess where we sit versus the market. And then we make investment choices kind of each year. It's a journey, and it's a roadmap. And when we get those headwinds, it's the, we were making good progress. We wanted it to be, putting all of this investment into our offer and into our colleagues because we're passionate about it and we believe in it. But now there's less money in the pot because because costs have gone up and because we're operating within a more challenging environment. And then there's choices that then that need to be made. And you end up not pleasing everybody, which is never a nice place to be, but just the reality of what we're faced with. And then similarly on the transformation side, from a kind of strategic delivery perspective, we've got to make choices about what we're going to deliver in any given year. So we'll go out and everybody will come up with their wish list of projects and programs and products they want to deliver. And product being an outcome as opposed to a physical kind of product. And of course, we have to go through a really challenging process of deciding, what makes the cut. And again, you disappoint a few, unfortunately. So that's challenging and it's gritty, and you have to get your sleeves rolled up and kind of get in there. But the important thing is to keep people engaged, continue to communicate with them and take them on the journey so that everybody, when the choices are made, everybody feels they've had an input into the choice and understands why that choice has been made, because we've got a set of guiding principles. Yeah,
absolutely. And interesting, isn't it? It just comes back to that authenticity and transparency and communication, and people, they might not like the decision, but they understand the decision, and therefore that builds more agency and more engagement, doesn't it? Yeah,
absolutely.
Interesting. And I mean, it's talking about sort of delivery and the challenges there. You've obviously the market you're in, huge seasonal factors in retail. So what does that look like at Card Factory in terms of sort of total workforce, and how much does it grow? When does your busy season start and end? What does it look like?
I mean, Christmas is like what we call it's super exciting, and it's a brilliant place to be at Christmas, but we spike significantly. So we sort of, our normal is around 8,000 kind of colleagues across the business, and then we go and hire another 6 in what we call peak periods. Seasonal colleagues, both in our stores and in our warehouse and in our kind of printing facility. So there's a huge amount of effort that goes into that seasonal recruitment that starts like August time. In fact, the thinking's already started, because it just becomes this cycle that happens. We take the learnings and we and we kind of go again.
Getting earlier every year. There's more ideas. Yeah,
absolutely. So and then obviously we've got all the seasons kind of in between as well, whether that's Valentine's. We come straight out of Christmas, we go into Valentine's. You've got Mother's Day, then it's you've got Easter. Father's Day will be clearly the next celebration that that we have. And back to school's another kind of key event for us. But from a recruiting point of view, Christmas is the one where we're kind of, we've got significant effort and require additional colleagues to ensure that we're there to serve our customers in the best way possible. And we tend to keep hold of some of those seasonal colleagues through to Mother's Day, and then things start to kind of normalize after Mother's Day.
And so, I mean, how do you go about attracting that volume of candidates you must need? In terms, what's the attraction strategy there?
So it's using job boards essentially is the main way in which we attract talent to our and channel them to our kind of website. We've got a lot of people that return. At university,
always a good sign.
University kind of colleagues who want to come back for the following year. My daughter's a good example of it, actually. She's done 2 Christmases in 2 different Card Factory stores now, and absolutely loves spending her couple of months in store in Nottingham. But the volume's coming from kind of job board advertising.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of sort of part of that attraction, communicating your EVP, attracting candidates from diverse backgrounds, and how important is that sort of explaining the culture and your approach to ED&I as part of that advertising? Is it something candidates are actively looking for?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's becoming far more important now than ever, actually, that candidates are looking for organizations that embrace difference, and an environment that they feel that they can thrive within. So for us, it's really important that we get that across, both our purpose around being accessible for everybody, and that translates not just for our customers but massively for our colleagues as well. And there's been a huge amount of effort and energy that's gone into our DE&I strategy, that's been facilitated by the people function, but massively engaged with by a number of people across the organisation, down to the consideration of the product, and as a result of our DE&I strategy, we've got a far better Pride offering, for example, in our stores. So it's important that we capture kind of what's important to us and what we believe in from an inclusivity point of view, and then translate that externally, so that when candidates are choosing, and they have choice, don't they, choosing where they go and work either permanently or on a seasonal basis, that they see Card Factory as an attractive employer to go and join, because they can come and be their authentic self.
Interesting. And I guess with was 8,000 growing to 14,000, you've got people from all communities and all backgrounds, and community groups internally who can contribute ideas and things like that. What would you say, where you've got perhaps a smaller organization that doesn't have that sort of wealth of talent to draw on, where do you think smaller organizations can where should they start, where can they learn in terms of building that EVP and that culture that attracts people in the right way?
I think it has to hang from the company's purpose and brand, because there can't be a misalignment. That it has to kind of hang nicely together. But I think my starting point would be to go and do some listening. Colleagues will tell you what it's like to work around here. You ask a few simple questions, you'll be able to gather that insight. I think the key thing then is to consider whether that's what you want it to be, because there could be a disconnect between what you want it to be and what colleagues are saying it is. And if there is a disconnect, that's where the people agenda needs to kick in to say, actually, we want this is where we want to be, and so we're going to put these things in place in order to get to that end state. Because the challenge, I suppose, with an EVP is you're going out externally and internally to tell the world what it's like to work here and what you expect and experience, as a colleague of X business. And if when that colleague interacts with joins, if that doesn't play out, then you've just gone through an expensive process of bringing talent into your organization, and and they're not going to feel happy about it, you're not going to feel happy about it, and nobody kind of wins. So I think there has to be authenticity in the story that's being told. I think your colleagues will know what their experience is, so go and do the listening and understand your starting point, set your aspirational goal for where you want to be, and start talking about what it's like and what you want it to be like, so you're not setting up unrealistic expectations.
That makes a lot of sense, and that that link to purpose, and again comes back authenticity and transparency. You mentioned Boots Opticians earlier, and I know there are some other organizations who've got strong purpose. Have you been able to sort of draw on experiences of that sort of purpose-led culture in other organizations that have helped you at Card Factory?
I think if I think about my time in Boots Opticians, we actually went through a significant strategic activity to define the purpose of Boots Opticians. As I said, it was somewhat independent from Boots at the time. I think there's more integration now, but we went through that kind of strategic exercise, and we came up with almost a formula which said, the purpose of Boots Opticians delivered through 3 moments of truth. So a great experience with an optometrist, a personalized solution, and then finishing on a high. So that lovely conversation that takes place as you're leaving the optician with your new frames or your contact lenses. And then we said that would be delivered through colleagues, and that formula would deliver the profit. And I love the fact that it started with purpose, delivered through customer experience, absolutely unlocked through colleague, and and almost this belief then that would deliver the results.
Rather
than it's starting with the results, which I find I don't find motivating. But clearly a business is a business to deliver results, and so the results have to be there. But there was just a belief and a kind of a real passion actually for profit being unlocked through doing through being true to your purpose. A lot of work and a lot of learning for me. It was a first, and it was a learning experience, and I've carried that through since then in subsequent organizations, to always come back to why do we do what we do, and actually as a people function, as a talent acquisition team, really challenging yourself on an ongoing basis to supporting the business in delivering that purpose, and being true to that.
That's really interesting. By coincidence, our ethos at TribePad that we talk about a lot in within all of our teams is people first, product second, profit third, and that's not, profit's not a dirty word. It's the single best indicator of a successfully run business, right? But it's that what you're describing is we hire smart people, look after them, give them a mission they buy into. They'll build great tech, they'll deliver great service, which in turn will be happy customers and therefore profit. As you say, it's just, don't start with, we're going to make this much profit. No. Start with the culture, the process, and the money will naturally flow.
It will. Yeah,
I love that. Really interesting. So I've heard you speak previously, and there was a phrase you used about the power of getting it right versus the challenge of getting it wrong. What do you mean by that, and how does that sort of play out in your role at Card Factory?
To think about in the context of what I said then. I think I was probably referring to maybe some mistakes I've made actually in my career, where I've jumped in too early with an answer or with a solution, and haven't spent enough time truly understanding the data and the facts. I've got a good example of that actually, and it's a recruitment example actually, which might be helpful. And when I was in Boots Opticians, so we had a really high turnover rate of optometrists. It's a really challenging market, competing with the NHS, with other private businesses, and there's only a few optometry schools, and therefore the pool of talent coming into the market, is quite limited, and then you've got everybody fighting for optometrists. So we had a really high turnover, and I didn't spend enough time understanding the facts, and I jumped in with a mission to just go recruit a load of optometrists, and it was like 100 optometrists in 100 days. And we did it. So the campaign was brilliant, and we managed to attract these 100 optometrists, but then we didn't keep them because I hadn't spent enough time thinking about the leaky bucket actually. And what was driving the turnover, and what did we need to do to plug the leaky bucket so we hire and retain these people, because we've got a really compelling purpose and offer, and etc. And so that really required some in-depth understanding of optometrists and what makes them tick and what's important to them. And actually, I learned that learning for them and ongoing learning and accreditation was something that was really important to them, and an ability to see career progression. So we later went and did a whole load of other work that kind of really did solve the problem. But I think that's where my phrase comes from. Of getting it right. You can't tie yourself up in knots trying to understand all the data and all the facts, but you've got to get sufficient amount of understanding so that whatever solution you're putting in place is fit for purpose. It isn't going to come back and later bite you. That would be my example of where I got it wrong, but the power of getting it right is actually we were able then to retain those colleagues.
Interesting, and it really highlights that sort of that important link between talent acquisition and talent management as well. You know, as I said, the leaky bucket. Otherwise, you've just got a department that's just constantly, you know, hire and lose, and expensive and yeah, negative to the culture as well. I would imagine seeing people sort of leave that often. Yeah, interesting. I guess sort of a final sort of area to talk about then in terms of your sort of transformation of HR is increasingly technology focused, and with your transformation role, I'd imagine technology plays a big part in that. So what's your sort of take on technology and how it can help, and where does it get in the way?
Oh, I mean, I think it's a massive enabler, and actually, Card Factory probably historically hasn't invested enough in technology, and we're feeling some of the pain of that now. In all honesty, it's we're carrying quite a lot of legacy, technology debt. And now we're in a cycle of it's going to cost a significant amount of money for us to kind of get our heads back up above water with it, but we are we're on a mission to do that. So I suppose my view is technology can allow you to be more effective, more efficient, to create better experiences for colleagues and candidates, but you've got to continue to invest in it. It's you can't just buy some technology and stick it on the side somewhere. It has to be an ongoing investment in keeping that contemporary and in line with the latest the latest in market insights and technology advancements as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jen, you're in a really interesting role in a really big company. You've got some incredible logos on your CV. If you could go back and give your 20-year-old self some sort of career advice, what would you tell her? Maybe just stick with the plan. It's worked out pretty well.
There's a bit of don't take life all just don't take it too seriously, I think would be my advice. I think when you're sort of progressing your career, I was very very driven, very ambitious, wanting to get to a certain point, and when I kind of look back, I think, God, I gave myself a really hard time for a number of years, and that wasn't the most enjoyable time. Luckily, I'm having a much better time now, but it would just be try and not take things too seriously and have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, have more fun. That sounds like a good motto for life generally. Jennifer Lawrence, thank you so much for chatting. It's been really interesting.
Thank you very much.
My thanks to Jennifer Lawrence from Card Factory, who shared some really interesting nuggets there for us. Hit subscribe and we'll notify you when the next episode is available. And we'd love it if you could share the view with your friends and colleagues. And see you next time.